Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Let me ask you a question. When you watch TV, or when you watch Netflix, listen to music, or play a game, would you rather sit like this, or would you rather lie down like this? We all prefer the comfy couch, right? You can see that this lady here is reclining on the couch, or lying down even, and who can blame her? It's comfortable, it's effortless, and it's suitable for most forms of entertainment. If we're not lying down by choice, we might be lying down out of necessity. For example, if you're in a hospital for treatment or research, or if you're bedbound at home due to some chronic illness. Whatever the reason, people spend a lot of time lying down. This is the reality of things. But I'm a virtual reality researcher, and I wonder if there isn't something better we can do with the time we spend lying down. My name is Thomas van Gemert. I'm a PhD fellow at the University of Copenhagen, and today I want to tell you something about the use of virtual reality while lying down. This work was done with my colleagues at the University of Copenhagen and the University of Melbourne, Kasper Hornbæk, Jarrod Knibbe, and Joanna Bergström. Now, I mentioned virtual reality, and I'm going to assume that we all know what that is. But I'm specifically interested in the type of contemporary virtual reality that encourages movement. I'm talking about an application like this, Slingshot, where the user has to move around the space, maneuver, lean and crouch, and aim the slingshot to shoot a ball at towers or boxes. Their whole body is involved in this interaction. I'm talking about this, Beat Saber, which we probably all know. Here you use your arms to slash at oncoming blocks, and at the same time you have to dodge walls that come from left or right, and you have to duck underneath them. I'm not just talking about games. This is a training application for using a table saw that was developed by my colleagues at the University of Melbourne. Here you can see that a user has to move between the tables to pick parts, lean over the workbenches to operate the machinery. So that we know that we like to lie down, and we know that we like to move around in virtual reality. But how do we combine these? How does this work? And is it even a good idea? To find out, we set up a qualitative user study where a user uses VR while lying down. But first we have to make sure that they can actually use VR apps while lying down. Because if you just put on the headset, lie down in a bed, and start the application, you'll be staring at the ceiling or the sky, which is usually not the most interesting part of the environment. To address this, we modified the VR drivers to rotate the world backwards 90 degrees, so that you get this effect. The user is now virtually standing up and can interact with the application from a quote-unquote normal perspective, but they're still physically lying down in a bed. Then we asked 14 experienced VR users to come in and use VR applications while lying down. We record their experience through a think-aloud protocol, video recordings, and semi-structured interviews. We selected 6 of the most popular applications on Steam VR at the time of writing, and we further selected these so that they each have different movement requirements. The results look a little something like this.
Just realizing that I can kind of turn around and kind of use my knees, which is quite comfortable actually.
Here we go. Oh, this is surprisingly intuitive. Yeah, I like this. Take forever for you guys. And oh no, you have to duck for this. We're bringing sit-ups into it. Yeah,
but
this is
like shooting, like being very agile is not that easy. Like here and here, or maybe it's also depending on.
I want to get some of the ones up there, but I don't know if I can actually reach them. Okay. Grab it again.
Okay, so my first thought is finally I'm standing high up on something. That's what I wanted in the first scenario. And it feels really good to like look out like that. I can imagine myself just like standing and looking out, and I enjoy this experience.
That does look like fun, doesn't it? But what can we learn from this? Let me highlight some of the benefits and drawbacks that we found in this study. The first being that moving around in bed is very difficult. This is perhaps not surprising, but it is kind of interesting. Because imagine if you have a cup on a desk in front of you and it's just outside of arm's reach. How do you get it? Well, you stretch out your arm and you lean forward to grab the cup safely. Now imagine doing that while lying down, as this user is doing in the illustration. You stretch out your arm, but then you have to use an ab crunch to lift your torso off the bed and then grab whatever you're trying to grab. Now, one ab crunch is fine, but it is quite a lot of effort, so if you have to do this multiple times, it quickly becomes uncomfortable. We call these types of movement maneuvering, and maneuvering is small, localized movements that you use to reposition yourself in a space. This is leaning, ducking, crouching, turning, and reaching. You can see in this illustration that a user has dropped something on the ground and has to pick it up again. How do you do that? Well, instead of crouching down, you use a sit-up to be able to reach the ground and grab the object. Maneuvering is a very common interaction in virtual reality, but it is surprisingly difficult to do while lying down. We don't really have a way to replace maneuvering. For example, locomotion techniques work well for travel, but they're not really precise enough to be used for maneuvering and actually usually make the problem worse. Luckily, it's not all struggle and sweat. In fact, if we forget the ab crunches for a second, using VR while lying down can be very comfortable and very pleasant. One of our participants said, "When I was able to do the interactions, where I was lying and resting my elbows, and the movement was constrained within that space, it actually felt totally fine." I want to highlight two more things that we found that worked well. One is interacting with applications that have lower movement requirements. An example of this is a nature exploration experience that you see on the left. A second one is a flight simulator that you see in the middle. And even Beat Saber, surprisingly, worked quite well. If you disable the walls and you keep your elbows on the bed and your arms close to the bed, it is a very pleasant experience. The second one is that we saw participants use gameplay mechanics and other interactions as alternatives to movement. For example, in Blade and Sorcery, one of our participants had dropped their sword and was tired of using ab crunches to pick stuff up off the ground. Instead, they realized that the game has a kicking mechanic, and they could use that to attack their enemies. So they stayed nice and comfortable lying down and just pressed a button to defeat their enemies. Now, in general, I think that virtual reality while lying down has great potential, and it is absolutely usable, but we do need to address a couple of things. The main one being that we need a way to be able to maneuver while lying down. Another thing is that we could expand on the interaction with the arms and the legs. We saw that interacting within arm's reach is very usable and very comfortable, but at the same time we saw that the legs, for example, are not doing anything, and I'm sure there's potential there. Another thing is that comfort seems to be a matter of managing expectations to a degree, because for a lot of participants, the bed itself came with the expectation of being comfortable. So if you suddenly have to use a lot of movement, that can be frustrating and confusing. On the other hand, participants said that lying down and using virtual reality is great for new types of exercise or maybe physical therapy. To conclude, I think that using virtual reality with movement-rich interaction and lying down has great potential. We do need to address a couple of things, and this study has merely scratched the surface of the possibilities and the problems that arise from using virtual reality while lying down. You should absolutely check out the paper to see more of the interesting results we found and read the discussion on the future directions for this type of work. You can also try this yourself. The code is freely available on GitHub, and if you have a bed and a headset that supports Steam VR, you're pretty much good to go. Once again, I am Thomas van Gemert. I'll be around at the conference if you want to chat or ask questions, or feel free to reach out on my email or my Twitter. Thank you very much.